The senator from New Mexico.
Mr. President, I rise today to ask my colleagues to pass my Keep SNAP and WIC-funded Act of 2025, which has the backing of the entire Democratic caucus, the Democratic members of this Senate. Now, we all know access to food is a human right. It's that simple. And we're all fortunate enough to live in the United States of America, a nation that's rich, it's abundant, a nation that's rich in agricultural tradition, can be abundant in harvest. Now, in a nation blessed with such abundance, allowing our fellow Americans to go hungry is sadly right now a policy decision. I would argue a political decision, not a financial necessity. Now, the Trump administration has yet again made the decision, made the choice to allow our fellow Americans to go hungry. Now, let's be clear. The only way to ensure that SNAP benefits are issued by November 1st is for the Trump administration to release the billions of dollars it has sitting in an account at USDA that Congress appropriated, Democrats and Republicans working together to appropriate, to use for this purpose. As a matter of fact, never in the history of the United States has SNAP been allowed to lapse like this. As a matter of fact, during President Trump's first term, Secretary Perdue, President Trump, they tapped this same fund to allow SNAP benefits to continue to roll. Now, President Trump says that the use of SNAP contingency funds is illegal. Well, here's the document that was taken down from the USDA website that was up just days ago. He decided to take this down, and now even the Speaker of the House is lying to the American people, saying that it's not allowed. President Trump found $40 billion in U.S. taxpayer dollars to send to his political allies in Argentina just last week. But when it comes to feeding our own people here in the United States of America, he refuses to act. Back home in New Mexico, 1 in 5 people rely on SNAP. They aren't strangers. They're neighbors, co-workers, friends, children, people I go to church with. They're the folks we say hello to at the grocery store or at a Little League game. President Trump's refusal to release SNAP funding doesn't just impact New Mexico. States like Louisiana, where Speaker Johnson is from, are facing the same crisis. Louisiana is third on the list of constituents that will be negatively impacted. Now, I've been fortunate enough to visit several food banks across New Mexico and meet with community members who are working around the clock to make sure neighbors have something to eat. To every one of our community members who have stepped up, I want to say thank you, not just across New Mexico, but across America. I am proud to represent a community that takes care of each other when times are tough. It shouldn't have to be this way. Since the creation of SNAP, there's never been a lapse. There's never been a lapse in SNAP funding during a government shutdown. The Trump administration has the authority and the funds to keep SNAP running during this shutdown. And don't take my word for it. Look at the USDA's own guidance that they removed from their website that justifies this. Any failure to do so right now falls squarely on the Trump administration and Republicans. We could vote on this today, on this bill or one that Senator Hawley's authored as well that has many Republican colleagues that are co-sponsors to prevent a hunger crisis. This pain does not need to happen. President Trump is choosing to inflict pain on American families by holding meals hostage. That's why I'm leading this legislation to ensure no child, parent, or veteran misses a meal because of the Republican shutdown. It also says that if states, tribal governments are in a position right now to actually fund SNAP programs, that they do get reimbursed, unlike what President Trump has been threatening them that they will not. We cannot stand by and let our neighbors go hungry. So I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, and I appreciate everyone that's reached out to my office to have a conversation about this piece of legislation. I hope we can work together, we find a path forward. But I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to come together to pass this bill now, fund SNAP, fund WIC, before this hunger crisis hits our communities. So, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to immediate consideration of S 3071 introduced earlier today, that the bill be considered read 3 times and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there an objection?
Mr. President.
The Majority Leader.
Thank you. Reserving the right to object, let me just point out, if I might, that we are 29 days into a Democrat shutdown. And the senator from New Mexico was absolutely right. SNAP recipients shouldn't go without food. People should be getting paid in this country. And we've tried to do that 13 times. And you voted no 13 times. This isn't a political game. These are real people's lives that we're talking about. And you all have just figured out, 29 days in, that, oh, there might be some consequences. There are people who run out of money. Yeah, we're 29 days in. And they've done their best to make sure that a lot of these programs are funded. But at some point, the government runs out of money. 13 times, people over here voted to fund SNAP. 13 times they voted to fund WIC. My aching back. Finally realized this thing has consequences. Well, you know what? What Democrats are doing here. They're making plans to keep the shutdown going. And they realize, all of a sudden, 29 days in, that this is a real consequence, real life pain for American families, something that results from their shutdown. So are they making plans to end the shutdown and reopen the government? Nope. They're going to propose a bill to fund food stamps during their shutdown. Mr. President, this request is a transparent admission that Democrats want to keep the shutdown for what? Another month? Longer? This bill is a cynical attempt to provide political cover for Democrats to allow them to carry on their government shutdown for the long term. Now, I'll point out, we did 13 short-term clean CRs when they had the majority and President Biden was in the White House. 13. They've now voted 13 times against a clean CR. I have no idea where you're coming from. The Democrat leader said that President Trump could end this with a stroke of his pen. And he's right. We passed that bill with a stroke of his pen, he'll sign it into law. And the government opens up. And SNAP beneficiaries, SNAP recipients get food assistance. But you know what else? TSA workers get paid. Air traffic controllers get paid. Border Patrol agents get paid. Troops get paid. These people here get paid who are working without pay. You want to extend that and keep that going? Give me a break. So the people who aren't going to get the benefit of what they're trying to do today, Mr. President, are all the other programs that are affected. Head Start, grants to law enforcement to fight fentanyl and hire more cops to protect communities. Rural development programs that are important in my state, Senator from New Mexico State, I assume as well, that support housing, utilities, infrastructure projects in rural communities. Small business loans, certain direct loan and emergency programs that farmers rely on. National Guard training, critical to our nation's military readiness. Veterans transition assistance as they come out of service. Veterans cemetery services. Right now, there are no headstones, memorial certificates, cemetery maintenance, programs that are at risk, rental and housing assistance. delays in processing FHA-insured loans, delays in aircraft inspections and maintenance for air traffic control equipment, people that are currently not getting paid. I mentioned some of them, but air traffic controllers, TSA officers, Capitol Police, the people who protect us in this building, NOAA employees who are tracking hurricanes and other potential weather disruptions, disasters, food inspectors, other food and drug safety officials, mine safety inspectors, people who don't have pay certainty right now, troops, Coast Guard, ICE, Border Patrol, federal law enforcement, federal federal wildland fighters, firefighters, extenders that have lapsed, telehealth and at-home care, community health centers, teaching health centers, special diabetes programs, payments for ambulances, hospital at-home services, other lapsed authorizations, CISA to prevent against cyber attacks, National Flood Insurance Program to prevent closure, on homes in flood zones. That's what you're leaving on the table. The bill at the desk takes care of all of it. Funds SNAP, funds WIC, and yes, with the stroke of the president's pen, he can sign it into law and everybody starts getting paid again. This is got to stop. Hostage taking. Now you want some political cover. How long is this going to go on? How much longer do you want to see it go on? Just out of curiosity. So you think this buys some time. You want the shutdown to go on for another month, and then we're going to have another people come down here and, well, let's carve this out or carve this out. Why don't we just open the government? I've never seen anything like this. I've been here a good amount of time. I've seen continuing resolutions and appropriations problems and funding fights and government shutdowns. I've been through a few. I've never seen anything like this. This just isn't done. You want to have a discussion about health care? Absolutely. Let's do it. Open the government, let's do it. President will sit down with Democrats next week if you want to talk about health care. That's not what this is about. So, Mr. President, we're not going to pick winners and losers. It's time to fund everybody who's experiencing the pain from this shutdown. The Democrats really want to fund SNAP and WIC. I have a bill for them, sitting right there at the desk. Clean, nonpartisan, CR to fund SNAP, WIC, and the entire government, and all the many programs and people that the Democrat SNAP bill completely ignores. Mr. President, Democrats have spent a month now, playing with people's livelihoods because the far left wing of their party won't let them accept a clean, nonpartisan CR. If they want to prevent damage from their shutdown, they can end the shutdown. The bill's right here at the desk. So, Mr. President, I ask that the senator from New Mexico modify his request so that the Senate can proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar number 168, H.R. 5371, that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Our cameras and crews take us now to Capitol Hill, where the U.S. government shutdown approaches a record. So if lawmakers cannot pass a bill to fund the government in 6 days, the shutdown will tie the record for the longest shutdown. That time, by the way, was back in 2018 during the first Trump administration. The result? Some 40 to 42 million Americans will lose their federally funded food benefits in just days. Now, in the run-up, lawyers for 25 states and the District of Columbia are taking the Trump administration to court. Their argument here is that the law requires the government to tap into those contingency funds, and they do exist, and there's a lot of money here that could keep that food assistance called SNAP funded. So far, lawmakers say they can't do that. Now, add to that development, just moments ago, Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar announced a bill to fund those food benefits. She accuses the Trump administration of reversing its policy to pay for SNAP during a shutdown. Listen.
They clearly knew that this could happen, and they actually had on their website, and I know many of you have seen this, a plan that was not issued under the Biden administration. It was issued under the Trump administration, and we screenshot it, so we have it. No one denied that it was out there. It's now magically disappeared like the East Wing. And it says this. It says, the receipts were these. This plan said, congressional intent is evident, congressional intent, that SNAP's operations should continue during a shutdown, and multi-year contingency funds are also available to fund participant benefits in the event that a lapse occurs. So there it is. We would call that a smoking gun in my old job as a prosecutor.
So Klobuchar says there it is. CBS News congressional reporter Torian Small joins us live from Capitol Hill. I'm wondering what the response is to what she just said. And do Republicans have any plan to keep SNAP funds going and food on the table for so many millions of Americans?
Yeah, we know Senator Josh Hawley, the Republican from Missouri, has legislation on the table as we speak, potentially up for consideration for a floor vote that would see SNAP benefits retroactively funded from the start of the government shutdown. So far, about 10 Republican senators have signed on to that. Democrats at the same time have a dueling bill that would do essentially the same thing. We'll see whether or not we would get bipartisan consensus for that to move forward. This appears, or there appears, to be appetite across the aisle to get this done. It seems like a very simple political win for both parties for that. And happening at the same time, there's dueling bills to fund federal workers. There's a Republican bill Senator Ron Johnson has sponsored that would fund or retroactively pay what he's calling expected federal workers, so those are workers who are forced to come in without pay. And then Democrats want to also extend that to furloughed workers. That's Senator Chris Van Hollen. The two have been having negotiations behind the scenes. We'll see whether or not any joint resolution comes to the Senate floor during that time.
Well, you know, we've seen the food lines for federal workers there in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere, but also there's a cost to our economy. The Congressional Budget Office just released an estimate on the cost of the shutdown to U.S. economic growth. What are you reading from those numbers, Torian?
Yeah, Reed, the top line here is that the U.S. is expected to lose about $14 billion. That's up to $14 billion in economic growth because of this government shutdown, dependent on how long it lasts. In its analysis, it broke down three scenarios. If the government shutdown were to end today, if it were to end in 6 weeks, and then if it were to end at the 8-week mark. You can see it on the screen now. It's a loss of about $33 billion. If it were to end this week, $54 billion in 6 weeks, $74 in 8 weeks. The CBO estimates, though, or believes that a lot of that would be recoverable. The amount that wouldn't is that top line number that I gave at the start, about $14 billion. That's a significant blow to the U.S. economy. And this is something that both sides are, again, pointing the blame at each other. Republicans saying Democrats are playing around with the U.S. economy, or Democrats are pushing back saying, hey, listen, we only want to ensure that health care is a part of this conversation. If this were a more bipartisan process, this wouldn't be the situation. So far, no word yet from the Trump administration if they've been in talks with Democrats. Vice President J.D. Vance was on the Hill yesterday to talk to Senate Republicans. But again, at this point, no end in sight as this rolls on into potentially day 30 tomorrow.
Second longest government shutdown in U.S. history, about to tie for the longest government shutdown. Torian Small, I hope you have your running shoes on because you're chasing all the leads. Thank you so much, my friend.